talk to me. Oh, criminals and felons. Is that also them, me or you? Who am I to not see through their eyes? Oh, I gotta say, bureaucracy. Oh, I could see another way. Okay. Little conversation, my friends. Welcome to episode whatever it is of the podcast. And I'm going to guess 84, I think. You would know this because it'll be in the title. Um, but we didn't come here to talk about the number of the title, did we? So, bureaucracy, like, a system of officers and people with positions, an interconnected system of information processing to conduct some sort of activity. That's useful, obviously, to some extent, but we use the word bureaucracy usually when it's getting complicated and there's a lot of it. And, you can say red tape, or too much bureaucracy. Uh, and I think bureaucracy is I think is a pretty big problem actually. Like, I think the world, like at least like some countries seem to not have enough of it. And in, maybe certain places it's like, oh, it's just one guy making all the decisions. And if there was a more organized system, maybe it'd be fairer and maybe, they'd be more competent to be able to get more done. There's definitely countries I've been to where it's pretty shocking. Like I don't mean I went to like the High Court in India and hadn't done anything wrong. I just went to the High Court and there was like packs of paper like standing around the courtyard and stuff, and there's a weird sense of like it was more organized than most of India, but I was still kind of shocked. Like this seems pretty haphazard for like the center of the judicial system for a billion people. I was like, whoa. Um, but oh, that's the bit I saw anyway. But then say in Ireland, or I used to live in Canada and Australia, like the bureaucracy is out of control. There's way too much of it, and it's like so. And I invite you to think, how much bureaucracy do we really need? Like, especially with the government, big companies. Look, so long as they're not, getting their hooks into the government to try and unfairly avoid competition, then companies, if they're not doing a good job, someone else can do a better job. You know, the loser loses, and you'll go bankrupt. And so the market sorts that out. If someone's got too much bureaucracy, like some banks or whatever, it's like you have to do jump through all sorts of hoops, like here at least like two-factor authentication or authentication. It's like, oh, just to make sure you're not laundering money, like our clients, our big clients, HSBC being caught laundering money for the drug cartels. Um, but they're like, oh, to avoid money laundering, you've got to prove yourself, like your real identity, and so you have to like, you can't just sign into your bank. You have to do this jump, do a code and it gets sent to your phone, and then, you can't just sign it from your computer. You need your phone to do it as well. And it's like, okay, that's kind of insane. I can't just, there's no toggle switch somewhere. Like, do you want that much protection? No. So there's instances of bureaucracy like that, or like, big companies where you try to get through to someone and it's just, oh, press three, there's voicemail. But the biggest thing, like I say, and those big companies tend to, I think, I don't know, you could argue that government plays a role in that and skewing the market by, crony capitalism. But the core, we'll leave that aside. Well, let's talk about government, like government services and things like, oh, you need this visa. Like I got, was getting visa stuff in Canada, and you wouldn't believe it was so crazy the process I had to go through with the forms you're filling in. It literally took like 5 hours a day for like months. Maybe not 5 hours. Some days, like a lot of days, there was like 5 hours. But then the many days was a bit less, but it was like a serious amount of work. And it's like what a waste of time. Like, um, can't you just go, okay, so this is who you are. All right, these are your details. Yeah, we want you in here, or no, we don't. And that maybe if we don't, then there's an appeal process, and but it just seems like things could be radically simpler. Or people tell me, oh, in was it Russia or maybe some other country? Um, oh, where was that student from? But they're being like, oh yeah, no, in my country, like you go, oh, I want to open a bank account. So you go to the bank, tell them your name and show them your passport, and then they set it up and you're done. You know, and like here, they're so complicated. Like it's taking weeks. They need to give this number to this person, and they send it back. Um, and just like, or I want to start a business. I think that there's so much, the economy would be so much better. Like we'd have so much more prosperity and free time, just because the more prosperity you have as a person, the more free time you can have, right? If you don't need to be working as much. And in general, just the society, have less crime, less angst if there's more prosperity. Um, we would be so much more prosperous if people were allowed to, for one thing, if we weren't taxed so much, which is another kind of insane bureaucracy. But it's theft as well. But but regulation, there's incredible amount of regulation. Like, oh, you want to start you're a doctor working in a hospital and you want to start a new a clinic or a hospital. Well, you can't just go and do it. Be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to get some other doctors. We're going to start doing it. If people want to come to us, they can. If they don't like our services, they'll go elsewhere. They won't come back, like any business, and then we'll go bankrupt if we don't do a good job. So we'd better do a good job. Most people will, if they're going to the effort, they'll do it. Um, uh, and or if we actually harm someone, then there's already laws to protect them, like criminal negligence. Oh, you either foresaw that your actions would cause harm, or if you didn't, then you should have foreseen that they would cause harm. And so either way, same thing. It's just as if it was intentional, and or more or less. And so you have a huge fine, or you go to prison, or whatever. Um, so we have that. It's just the same. You can't avoid people getting hurt from businesses. That happens all the time, right? Um, and so, but so we have that basic law, but still, it's like you can't just go start businesses so easily. It's like, oh, you need to, go through these 1,000 pages of documents and sign this and do this and do this. It's like, why? Why? What's the benefit of this? It almost seems like it's just benefiting lawyers and accountants. And maybe huge companies who don't have to deal with the competition because all their, they have an army of lawyers and accountants who can deal with all this crazy paperwork, but, smaller fish can't. So, if you're a bit more conspiratorially minded, you might wonder if that's not also a factor here. That, we've been bureaucratized as a society because it's in the interests of big players to make things extremely complicated. So people either don't want to get involved in business, or they think it's too hard, or they try and they just get swamped by the amount of time or money required to deal with the process. And then, you can get sued if you didn't do some tiny thing, or and yeah, so I think that's whatever the case, it's like I don't see why we need so much bureaucracy. And but when you think about the nature of government bureaucracy as well, like the services, so it's not just like, oh, regulating stuff, it's also they're, taxing the hell out of us to pay for all these departments, a lot of it services they're providing. So, education, healthcare, roads, electricity, water, blah, blah, blah. Ireland is a very green country. There's an enormous amount of rain, um, and yet while I've been here, it's been like, oh, there's a water shortage, at times. We're like, okay, you can't use much water for a while. It's like, what? How? And it's like, oh, it turns out the government, the government's department or whatever, or who are managing the water, half of the pipes are like leaky and rusted and stuff, and they haven't replaced them. And and I've had enough experience with like bureaucrats dealing with them on the other side of like I need help, and they're just being unhelpful here and Canada, and Australia. Um, but also like I know people who work inside the system and they tell me this, like, yeah, I got here, like my friend was like, he started working at an office there in the government, and he was like, all right, so what do I do? Yeah, yeah, here's your stuff. I was like, oh, okay. And he gets through it all in one morning and he goes, all right, I've done that. What do I do now? And they were like, whoa, whoa, slow down. What are you doing? Like, you don't need to, it's okay. You don't need to work so fast. And he's like, okay, well, I mean, what do I do now? I've got no work. And they're like, oh, just go through your inbox. Just, go sort of, and basically and then they're all working from home as much as possible and he was saying to them, he's like, like, they're like, oh, you got to work in person here, something. And he's like, I'm not, okay, but I'm not working. Like, hey, I know this is all fraud. Like, you're at home, you're not working. I know, if I'm going to be here, I'm not working. And they're like, but what are we going to say then to the bosses? And they're like, just say whatever. But like, you know, so and I know like lawyers, a lawyer who said, you know, he was like, oh yeah, but half the time I'm just pretending. Lawyer's like an actor. It's kind of like you're acting, half the time we're not even working. We're just pretending. You're doing something and someone comes by, okay, you look like you're busy, um, charging every 6 minutes, um, and he's saying, Jamie, we're very lazy people. Was he talking about the Irish or the lawyers? But I think he could speak for the lawyers. I'm not sure if he can speak for the Irish in general. A lot of very hardworking people having to pay for all this bureaucracy. Um, but so, the thing is, when there's a system, if it's capitalism, which gets a bad name, but hey, it's actually amazing. Like crony capitalism is, yeah, a big problem. Better than communism. It's not the worst system you could think of, but crony capitalism, where the government is involved in the economy and basically, big companies have basically bought control of the government through providing election financing. So, if you want to be able to compete with the advertising of the other people, you better get with the program and get that big money because otherwise you're going to get drowned out and it'll be very hard. The people are very busy working, slaving away under this system, and so they don't have that much attention, and so they can, get tricked into thinking you're not as good, or they don't even know about you. And so, if you want to be able to compete, you better, and if you better play ball. And once you get in, if you try to change your tune, they'll go fund some other person and get you out of there. Um, and also, funding of universities and NGOs, etc., think tanks. There's all these ways where money is able to influence politicians a lot. And, then the politicians choose the judges and the bureaucrats, or some places the judges also have elections. And so, you got George Soros, whatever, with all these judges in the USA, buying, basically bankrolling them, and they're extremely regressive, really, defund the police and all this insane stuff. But nonetheless, you have this situation where the crony capitalism, where the government is basically purchased by the big corporations, big money, and then they use their influence to have the government change the rules and regulations to be more in their favor. Give them no bid contracts. Give them where they just get all this work. Oh, you want to make a bunch of tanks? Oh yeah, we can do that. I'm a car company. I can do that for you. And then, or maybe you don't even want to make some tanks. Well, maybe you should make some tanks and then give me the contract. All that kind of stuff. And the more control or influence the big money gets over the government, the bigger they make the government, the more interventionist in the economy, and then that benefits them even more, which gives them even more money and more power over the government, and you've got this vicious feedback loop. And so that's not so good because companies which aren't providing as good bang for the buck, like the balance of quality of good or service versus price, how low the price is and how high the quality is, that ratio is not very favorable compared to other competitors, and yet somehow they're able to outcompete them just because they're connected politically. They're able to say, oh, you need to pay $100,000 a year for this licensing check thing, or this thing which requires $100,000 of lawyer fees or accountant fees, and suddenly all these competitors just can't survive. Or launching lawsuits against them, and the legal profession allowing these things, these spurious kind of precedents and cases. But hey, certain moneyed people or politicians, whatever, like, yeah, this guy is more in favor of that legal kind of philosophy. Yeah, let's put him in. I wonder why. Follow the money. And but but capitalism itself is amazing and pure. Like, oh, if you're not providing better value for money than other people, if you're not solving people's problems, giving them what they want or need for a better ratio or better combination of quality of good or service versus price, then they won't give you the money. They give you money if it's a mutually beneficial, voluntary transaction. So like, oh, what you've got, I want that more than my 50 euro note. And hey, you've got plenty of those things. You sell them, you make them, but you could do with more money because then you can change that into other stuff you want. So yeah, this helps both of us. Great, you know. That's millions of those transactions all around that in economy. That is, capitalism at work. A decentralized system of resource allocation, an organic natural system, and yet, so that's and in that system, if you don't provide, if you're not virtuous, you're not providing value, then you disappear. You lose money, and then you either change, you either work harder. It's very uncomfortable. You have to work harder. You have to lower your prices. You have to try to compete. And even then, maybe you go bankrupt because someone else is trying more, or they're more talented or whatever. But at the end of the day, the purchasers get the best quality stuff. And it's a bit harder on the people providing it. But if you're the best, then you get the rewards. If you're not, then you get punished. And so it's pretty strict and intense. But then, oh, maybe you were never meant to be in that industry. Maybe you're better at doing some other thing, and you'll go find that. Or maybe you're not really designed to be a leader, like a boss or whatever, or an entrepreneur. Maybe you should just be an employee somewhere. And so, and people can be employees. They can get their skills, learn stuff, get some capital from saving up, and then go start off a competitor doing the same thing. If there's not mountains of regulation, they can just do that. Um, but in the bureaucracy, the government's like, oh, we're doing this thing, education or healthcare or whatever, and they can't get fired. The people involved, it's very hard to. Either they can't get fired at all, or in theory they could, but then there's unions which get involved, and dissuade that from happening. And that could happen to some extent in capitalism, but there's always a competitor who can offer a lower price. But governments are able to set these monopolies where basically, oh, you're already paying taxes for free, quote unquote, free education or healthcare, etc. So why are you going to pay money which you don't have anymore because we took it through taxes? Why would you get private, education or healthcare or whatever? And you know, so basically they're taking the money and saying, yeah, if you want to spend twice and go elsewhere, you can, you know. But there's not many people who are going to do that, and so it ends up being private services are only high end, very high, cost, or the price is high, although the value is high as well, the quality. But like if the government wasn't involved in healthcare or education, it was like, yeah, there's just doctors offering clinics. This is the way it used to be, and in many societies, it's been very successful like this. Actually, there were many providers who were offering middle quality good or service for middle level price, and then those low quality for low price and high quality for high price. And the more who enter the market, the cheaper it gets for the purchaser, right? Supply and demand. Um, and so, but that's not allowed to happen because the government gets involved. But then the people doing it is this bureaucracy. So I think human nature is if we've always had the risk of, survival has been a great foundation of our motivations. When you remove that, it's like, oh yeah, you can't lose your job. Many people will not do their jobs. They'll just be lazy. And then you have systems of that and defense mechanisms get put in like, oh, slow down there. Don't be doing that so much. And, oh, you're going to talk about us or maybe you're fired, or we all deny it. We like, link, go back to back and, block you out of the system, and this happens in government, happens like politicians, happens bureaucracy, like everywhere, and so uh, let's see, yeah. So that's the bureaucracy. You can't fire them, and so you get this, like you imagine the government, making your car or making your phone or making your clothes. Do you think could be better than the private market? But then we think somehow these bureaucracies are better able to make, provide education or healthcare or something. I'm not sure it makes too much sense. Although I do think it's a transitionary thing, it would be good to have an opt-in thing where, like, yeah, if you want the government to do it, your taxes, or an opt-out thing, you can have a lower rate of tax. Your percentage contribution to the education or healthcare, etc., you can save that in taxes, but then you're not allowed into the public bureaucracy systems of like free healthcare, free, education or whatever. And I think a lot of people go, yeah, give me my money. I'll go use that in the private system. And I think that would actually force, that would be great. You could have both. Then that would actually force the public system to adapt and would have to compete. You're all going to lose your jobs there, even if you don't get fired. That system's going to dissolve, and it'll just be replaced by a private system, unless you start competing in terms of quality of service with what's becoming available on the private market. As people pull out and go, I'm not paying taxes for that. I'd rather go private. Um, so yeah, that's bureaucracy. Anything else? Mm, I'd also just say, all the wars, all the greatest crimes in history are basically committed by governments. And a government is essentially an armed bureaucracy, as Graham Hancock says. We're basically dealing with all these armed bureaucracies, like wrestling for domination and control of resources and the planet. And uh, yeah, like, you and I have much more, me and someone from North Korea, or me from anyone from any culture, we have a lot more in common with each other than we do with our governments, you know? And I think we're all one anyway, and I don't think we should get into us against them psychology with even the government, because they're all just humans. But we have to be real and honest and be like, yeah, these are armed bureaucracies. Often they're not very sensitive or even, interested in the welfare of you and I. And it causes a lot of problems, and it could be a lot better. It doesn't need to be this way. So finally, I just ask you, how much bureaucracy do we really need? And imagine a world where basically, yeah, sign this paper. There you go ahead, do the thing. There's just minimalist bureaucracy. And if you cause a problem, if you hurt someone, either there's the criminal law or in tort law, negligence. Oh, you should have known. Okay, you get in trouble. If you provide bad quality of service, hey, or someone does that, okay, you just don't go back to them. Go to a different company, like you do with restaurants. So imagine a world like that. Wouldn't it be nice? Won't it be nice? Yes, it will. Yes, it is. All right, that's it. I'll see you next week.